4. Great. So hello and welcome to Nora Startup Webinar. We have this really kind of mixed bag today of a title because we think it's quite strange to see what's happening, with all these whistleblowing and all these large technology companies, but then to consider artificial intelligence and also this more practical context. So why social entrepreneurship? Social entrepreneurship is an approach by individuals, groups, startup companies, or entrepreneurs where they develop, fund, and implement solutions to social, cultural, and environmental issues. And a lot of social questions that we ask today is kind of how we govern information or misinformation. The Facebook whistleblower, Frances Haugen, recently made the world understand that Facebook has a long way to go to become a responsible social platform. And they might not have handled information as well as one hoped, especially like with large differences between different languages and different places. And we also have with us a representative from the Norwegian Data Protection Authority, Datatilsynet, and they also recently published a report on whether they should have a Facebook page, and it seems the answer was that it was not responsible to have a Facebook page. So we will be sure to hear a little bit more about that today too. So how are these things connected? Let's try to find out. So first, let's start with a round of introductions. My name is Alex Moltza, and I work for Nora with AI policy and ethics. And I will first introduce Eirik Gulbrandsen. Could you say a few sentences about yourself?
Yeah, I'm working at the Norwegian Data Protection Authority as a technologist, and also working a lot with our responsible or sandbox for responsible AI. And my background is from working with big US companies, working with cybersecurity, and also using AI in that context.
Great, thank you, Eirik. Could we have a few words from you, Alan, as well?
Yes, hello, thanks for having me here. And my name is Alan, and I'm a co-founder and CEO of Secure Practice, and we're a startup founded in 2017, and we work with we'll call it social entrepreneurship, but we help the world fight cybercrime basically through, of course, some commercial offering. So yeah, that's the very brief introduction.
Thank you, Alan. And now let's hear from Morten. Could you tell a little bit about who you are, what do you do?
Hi, everyone, and thanks for the invitation. My name is Morten Langfeldt Dalbakk. I'm currently the head of Insight and Analysis at faktisk.no, which is the only fact checker in Norway. We also have an education division, among other things. I've been working there for a couple of years, and before that, I worked at Adresseavisen in Trondheim as a journalist and commentator. And before that, I did a PhD in analytical philosophy at NTNU. So quite a diverse path to getting here, but I'm looking forward to talking more to all of you.
Great, thank you so much. And we will start with the presentations straight away. So Eirik Gulbrandsen, could you please give us a short presentation of the work that you're doing?
Okay, so I do that instead of Morten? I think Morten was supposed to start.
I don't mind.
Okay, it's okay.
Eirik, I think it would be great if...
Okay, there it is.
Thank you.
Yes, I think I'm going to present very quickly our stance on the social media actors out there. So very quickly, already earlier this year, I wrote a blog which I called Algorithms, Trust, and Sandboxes, and basically where I compare today's social media companies with the food industry of the 1800s. or the 18th century, because at that point that was a very new industry, and they did a lot of stuff that was not very healthy, to be honest. As you can see in the quote down there, they were heavily into corn syrup and diluted milk, and that's a pretty good analogy to what's happening today. This blog was also basically based on a personal or a survey we did in 2019 and 2020, where we surveyed people's feelings towards different kind of services. And what we found, it's only Norwegian, what we found that the social media companies have almost no trust at all. And they can thank themselves for that. We see that there are parts of those offering services which have relatively high trust, but all the different actors like Google, Yahoo, Bing, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and so on has almost no trust in terms of how people think they are using their personal data. And despite that, we're using those services. But we have also worked towards these problems earlier, and already in 2018, after the election in the US, we addressed the Cambridge Analytica case, of course, which was a very pretty big eye-opener in terms of what Facebook data can be used for. And even though Facebook claims that they don't sell any personal data, they make it very easy to use it in different contexts. So in this case, we have also now recently worked with a case called Grindr, which is a social app for meeting people. And we actually issued Grindr, or we have indicated an intention to give them a fine of 100 million Norwegian kroner, which is the biggest fine Notilsyn has ever given to anyone. And the background for that was a report from the Consumer Council in Norway called Out of Control, which basically take the lid off the problems concerning usage of ad tech networks. And the key problem here was that the different social media platforms are so heavily interwoven with the ad networks that is basically the same industry. And that's also it's important to understand that Facebook, at least Facebook and a lot of other social media platforms, they are not really social media platforms. They are ad platforms. They sell ads. They cannot explain that away. They're selling ads. Their technology is about getting the most possible clicks to sell ads. And the infrastructure below, it's incredibly complicated, incredibly interwoven, and basically like a black box. So it's very, very difficult to understand how personal data is used when you are being served ads. But of course, the most recent and interesting case is the fact that the Norwegian Data Protection Authority has gone out very publicly and said that we are not going to use Facebook. So we planned for it, and we intended actually to consider it. And we made an internal risk assessment. And also ran on the DPA, Data Protection and Impact Assessment. And we basically found that it's impossible to make use of Facebook as a company without breaching GDPR. And to support that, we also have published our own risk assessment. So we in detail explain why we think it's problematic to use Facebook. And we also see that more and more the public companies or public offices in Norway are actually retracting their use of Facebook. And of course, as Alex mentioned, Facebook has their own problems globally and in the US. So maybe we are seeing a shift here. And getting back to why, because we have also written an article, our director has written an article about that's why we said no. And the short story is that it's impossible to make any head of tail of how Facebook actually use the personal data they collect. They cannot document it, they won't document it. And these are example questions because Facebook came to us after report, so after being pretty hard to get in dialogue with. They then got back to us after we published that report and asked, why haven't you talked to us? And that's why a little bit ironic, but we do have questions from Facebook that we want them to answer in public. And sample questions could be like, how do you use your data? And we have asked them several times. They haven't really given any good answers on how they profile anyone or young people or children. And we also challenge them on actually providing understandable and meaningful information about how this information is used. And we also ask them how they're going to support European companies in terms of being compliant with GDPR, and also how they build in privacy. And all these are questions we are happy to ask Facebook, and happy to get answers to. In that context, we also have something called the regulatory sandbox for AI and privacy. And that has its origin in the National Strategy for Artificial Intelligence in Norway. And one of the concrete things was that they wanted to establish a sandbox, and Datatilsynet got that mission. So what we're trying to achieve is actually trying to work with companies that want to develop solutions using AI and see if you can do that in a privacy-friendly way. Can you innovate and still provide privacy? So we actually want to, in a constructive way, to work with companies in Norway to see if we can do this in a right way. So that's a key reason for why. And we had a lot of applications in the first round. We're now beginning to start to go into the second round, and from a lot of different areas. So we have a pretty good group of people that want to be part of the sandbox. And the first round had the 3 participants. Now with a big project concerning prediction of people that need to have meetings and so on. And as you can see at number 4 there, we have Secure Practice, which is one of the participating companies in that sandbox, which was about how do you assess people's knowledge about cybersecurity in a good way without challenging their privacy in a bad way. There's a big point here that everything that's been learned from those sandbox projects are going to be shared to everyone. So it's so the results of these discussions and these different written material will be available to anyone and everyone. And I also want to mention just briefly at the end that on April 21st, the European Commission proposed a new bill called the Artificial Intelligence Act, which we are, of course, are very interested in. And it's an act which in many ways looks like GDPR, and probably will be implemented like GDPR, but we do not know yet. It's early days. So it's based on several, on a pretty good foundation, but it will be interesting to see in what way it will be implemented in practice. So this will be probably in addition to GDPR and the Police Registry Directive in Norway. But again, nothing is being carved into stone here. We were still looking for to see how this will end up. So, one last slide. I just want to bring up that one of the things that this act brings up is categorizing the usage of AI, including social media. And an example of something they have already said probably will be labeled like an unacceptable risk is using continuous surveillance by police, which several countries in Europe are doing right now. This new law, if it takes effect, will make that basically illegal. So that's some interesting stuff happening there. So that's what my quick intro in terms of Datatilsynet's thoughts about social media and what happens there and the challenges.
Thank you so much, Eirik. This is really wonderful. I'm so glad we have such an engaged data protection authority in Norway, and that takes a stance, and that are willing to say it out loud, because it's a lot of people want to want to please these large technology companies in a way, and that's how it is. It's there's a power relationship existing, but in the not in the end, but like in the continuity that is our everyday life, this information that is being shared influences our whole population in Norway. So
yeah. And we have to taste our own medicine, because we in many ways see a lot of benefits in being available to people at Facebook. It's a very easy way to establish dialogues and so on, but it's simply not possible.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. Let's discuss that more later. But first, to visit this topic of information or misinformation or facts or not facts, let's hear more from Morten and faktisk.no. Yes. Let's see. You are on mute, Morten.
I just needed to get off the toolbar. As I told you before, I'm used to the Google interface.
Yeah.
I'm still screen sharing. Very good. Okay, so thank you. Sorry about the slight technical issues, unfamiliar platform. I am Morten Langford Dalbakk from faktisk.no, as I said in the introduction, and I'm just going to briefly describe how we have been working to counter misinformation especially on social media platforms, and how we're planning to do so better in the future. So for those of you who don't know what faktisk.no is, we started in 2017 as a fact-checking organization. We're funded by most of the major Norwegian media companies, including sort of the eternal competitors VG and Dagbladet, the major daily newspapers in Norway, and both public broadcasters, both broadcasters in Norway, the public NRK and the private commercial TV 2. So that's sort of our origin. And 4 years later, in 2021, we have grown quite a lot. We are now what we think of as a knowledge sector nonprofit, and we have 3 divisions that all contribute to promoting an open, inclusive, and fact-based public debate, which is considered sort of our main societal mission. And the 3 divisions are the fact checkers in the newsroom. They are, of course, the core of faktisk.no. They are the ones who provide the journalistic stuff we do. They fact check politicians. They fact check viral misinformation online and so on. We also have an educational and media literacy division, Tank, and an insight and analysis division, which I am heading, and it started only a few months ago. So in general, our main aim is to limit the spread of misleading and false content, both online and in society in general, by, for example, fact-checking and debunking viral claims and conspiracy theories. And as you can probably imagine, over the past year or so, our main job has really been to debunk weird and outlandish claims about the COVID-19 pandemic. We also fact-check claims made by prominent public figures, in particular politicians, and we, through Tank, our education division, we provide methods and materials educators can use to teach students media literacy and critical thinking, especially with respect to the content they encounter online. And finally, we research and analyze how information, including misinformation, is spreading through the Norwegian online universe. That's something we just recently started. I'm going to tell you a bit more about that later on. And also, just in the interest of both full disclosure and because that's part of the topic of this particular conversation, we also contribute to fact-checking on Facebook through the third-party fact-checking program. So we actually work with Facebook to label misleading and false content on Facebook that we have fact-checked. I can talk about that more in the debate later on, because I think working with Facebook is kind of a point of controversy. And as I said, our core thing is fact-checking claims. And here you can see 4 examples of claims we've fact-checked in the past year. So the first one is whether Norway is among the largest exporters of CO2, which was mostly true. It was claimed by one of the members of the Green Party, who is now in Parliament. Whether vaccines against COVID-19 have killed more people than COVID-19 itself, which was actually a surprisingly regular claim online. That's, of course, very false. A claim whether the WHO confirmed that COVID-19 is no more dangerous than the flu. Well, I didn't even bother to label that one, it appears, because that's also very false. And whether climate emissions from Oslo have increased, which is also actually false. It would have been true if it was stated a year ago, but it's no longer true. So that's sort of like the ground floor work that we're doing is through our newsroom, where we fact check these kinds of claims. But in addition to just fact-checking claims, we've also in the past done investigative journalism to see who is spreading misinformation in Norway and how. And I think that's something that's maybe a bit more relevant to this particular debate, because we have actually, I think, been able to identify some key features of Norwegian online misinformation. And the image you can see to the right here is a network graph that depicts sort of a misinformation ecosystem centered around certain alternative media sites in Norway. Now, these alternative media sites themselves do not necessarily spread misinformation, but as we've seen, there's a substantial overlap between people who share and interact with, or more specifically, Facebook groups and pages that interact with the content from alternative news sites and media, and the groups that spread sort of more general misinformation, say conspiracy theories about COVID-19, about vaccines, about immigration, and so on. So there's a tightly interwoven sort of alternative media and misinformation ecosystem in Norway that we have attempted to analyze and map out. And there are some things we can say about this ecosystem. So it actually generates a lot of engagement on social media, and it's not at all in proportion to the size of the audience of the alternative media or of conspiracy theories and this particular type of viral misinformation. So we know that it's a small portion of the population who are actually contributing to this ecosystem, but they're contributing a lot. Like their articles and their groups generate more engagement than the page of the Prime Minister, for example. And we also saw during the pandemic that this misinformation ecosystem rapidly shared misleading and false claims about COVID-19 and vaccines, often taken from international sources. So for example, if any of you remember a viral video that was called Plandemic, it took less than 3 hours, I think, before that was shared widely in this misinformation ecosystem in Norway. And that was originally published in the US, obviously. So that's sort of the basic, I think that's a basic outline of the online misinformation ecosystem in Norway. And as I probably already indicated, it's mostly based on Facebook, like unlike some other countries where it would be based on WhatsApp or Telegram. But there are also a lot of things we unfortunately don't know. So I think we can say that we have pretty good knowledge of how what I call high-grade misinformation spreads on open platforms like Facebook and Twitter. By high-grade misinformation, I mean direct conspiracy theories and more outlandish claims like vaccines cause autism, like that sort of stuff. We also have a lot of blind spots in this domain. So our understanding of how medium and low-grade misinformation, like rumors and generally misleading content, so for example, that some bank is planning to raise the interest rate while it's really not, like that type of stuff, we don't really know how that spreads in the general population or online. We also have very limited insight into how content in general, including misleading content, travels on closed platforms like TikTok and Snapchat. And for us, that's a major challenge because Facebook is losing users, at least user engagement, quite rapidly. And people are moving on to more closed platforms, for example, and platforms that might be closed in the sense of being more private, but also platforms that do not really share data with external people or external organizations like us. So TikTok and Snapchat are examples of those platforms. And we don't really know if there's a lot of misinformation there, although we have reason to suspect that it is. In addition to that, we really lack what I call a deeper understanding of how the Norwegian digital information landscape works. So we don't really know how content is spreading around outside of Facebook. And that means also in part that it's impossible to estimate the impact of fact-checking efforts on the information landscape. So we don't really know if once we publish a fact check, does that really impact public social media conversations about the topic we fact checked? How does it impact what publishers, newspapers, alternative news sites write about that topic, and so on? That's something we are not able to tell at the moment. And I think every fact checker in the world is dreaming about the day when that's possible. So we have some quite major challenges and ways we could improve our work to counter misinformation. And that's sort of the priority of my division of Faktisk Innsikt, or the Insight division. And what we want to do is to map out the Norwegian online universe and investigate how information spreads on more closed platforms, by which I mean platforms that don't really share data, not privacy-oriented platforms. And to do that, we need to, I think, understand the networks of publishers and sites that form the core of the Norwegian online information ecosystem. So major publishers, major social media accounts, and so on. investigate how information flows through these networks and whether they can be influenced by, for example, fact checks or other events, and gain deeper insight into what kinds of misleading or false content Norwegian users are exposed to on, say, TikTok, for example. And to accomplish that, we are journalists and people who have been journalists for a while and can't really do this on our own. So we're actually looking to working with researchers and specialists within AI, machine learning, and other areas of analysis and modeling to see what is actually possible to learn about the Norwegian information space and how we can how AI or other methodologies can help us understand it. So if you're interested in or have ideas about that, please feel free to reach out. And this is how you would do it. Just send me an email. I'll get in touch with you. And thanks for your attention.
Thank you so much, Morten. That was faktisk really great. So I think it's great to see how this is being worked with in Norway, and also, I mean, it is a bit worrying that you are like one of the only actors on this in a way, because but one would hope there would be like more people working on this, on this related things. And like, how many people are you? I mean, I think it's great that you are there. I think it's fantastic. But I just think there's a lot of information out there.
Yes. So, I mean, there's just in Norway, there is so much information that it's impossible to keep track of. And I think it would be a good thing if more people tried to dedicate themselves to fact checking. So some publishers already do some fact checking, like Filter Nyheter, for example. So they do occasional fact checking, but we're the only dedicated fact checker. And that's in a way, I mean, it's good to have a monopoly in a sense, but we're a nonprofit and would welcome the competition, I think, if other people wanted to try their hands on fact checking.
Yeah, very, very interesting. I think we have to go on to the next speaker, Erlend from Secure Practice. Being the last panelist to present, I really look forward to this presentation, and then just a reminder that around 7-10 minutes is a good time, just so we get a little bit of time for the discussion.
Sure.
Thank you.
All right, so Secure Practice, as a startup, few of you have probably heard of us, although we're almost 4 years old now. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on our company website, just to give a brief introduction to who we are. We're a commercial company, although we work with some of the challenges that kind of may be identified with social entrepreneurship. We build a cloud service for helping people with safety online, but we sell our services to other companies, business to business, and that's how we operate. So we have some 500-600 companies using our cloud services today, and some tens of thousands of users. And we process, a little bit of data related to this. We just to be very brief, illustrate what kind of challenge we are facing and trying to help with. Because in the context of a company, you often need to, or always need to secure your information. But kind of getting everyone on board and understanding that they are a part of the internet society, you need to be cyber aware, and you need to stay safe and take action yourself. It's not always straightforward. Many people prefer to just believe that there is so little risk being hit by a cyber attack or something. That's, well, how does that relate to me, and so on. And kind of cyber security training has been kind of the way to approach this problem. And yeah, just best effort, if you can say that, trying to give people some competency in the area, although many people will not learn a lot just from one-size-fits-all training. And in very corporate environments where compliance and mandatory training is the main driver, then, you can maybe see this face in front of you. To be very concrete, we process data in terms of our mail risk service. As an example, we have made a button for Outlook that you can click if you got a suspicious email in your inbox. You can click it to perform an analysis. Over the last year, we've analyzed more than 100,000 suspicious emails. That may not be a very impressive number, considering that most security vendors brag about processing billions of security events every hour or whatever. But our thing is that we analyze the data for emails that have passed through the protections from all the top-notch state-of-the-art security vendors already. So we help people when something arrives in their inbox that they're not certain about. So here we use machine learning and have been doing this since the beginning of our company. But our vision is broader than just helping with emails. We want to make people safe online. And while the corporate environment is a good way of kind of commercially succeeding with selling a product, because there is an obvious need in companies to protect their information, this is also, well, you know, the Norwegian NorSIS, the Center for Information Security, have done surveys and found that, well, most people primarily learn about information security and safety online through their employer. So that's why maybe the workplace is a good place actually to teach people about being skeptical and cyber aware and staying safe online, because yeah, it's getting difficult for people, or difficult for a commercial offering, at least to consumers on these topics. I'm mainly going to focus on what Eirik mentioned in the introduction, the sandbox, and we have posed this question through our work: would you support artificial intelligence at work for a good cause? There may be various purposes and causes, like Facebook process data for selling advertisements, while we just try to help you stay safe online. But we still kind of do profiling of employees, and this is our kind of evolved service that will also do some profiling with artificial intelligence. And there may be many good causes, but as we know, it's not always the only thing that matters. But with a kind of artificial intelligence approach to making people stay safe, then well, you enter the risk where you kind of, yeah, you build a black box of something that people don't understand, and well, could be difficult to trust. And so we participated in this regulatory sandbox with the Datatilsynet since March. We're approaching a final report now in November. And I'm just going to tell you a little bit about that work. We are, as mentioned, in the sandbox along with 3 other pioneers. Our project is focused on measuring individual cyber risk actually in the workplace, not to give any details about individuals to their employer, but simply to process, to offer statistical overview for the customer, the company, and then to provide targeted training based on interest and competence to people, so we get much better training effect. And this is something we have been exploring to find out, is this possible to do? But our objective is to give better training. And then we were a bit kind of tabloid with our approach, but we want, after all, to make people cyber aware, and kind of from a societal perspective also, that is very useful to have people in society being aware of risks online and misinformation, etc. And we did this kind of voluntarily. We wanted to see if it's possible to make such a product. We know there are American vendors who already do this, but they say Ireland is a high risk, or they say in their marketing material that we will identify your next cyber breach in terms of which person will actually be subject to that breach. We wanted to take a privacy-friendly approach to this. So designing this approach, although the approach may seem controversial, at least, still, how is it possible to do? So taking our experience from working with machine learning and working with people, and yeah, we applied for sandbox participation. And we got this other article published where we were interviewed, and the journalists from America, he asked us, why on earth would you volunteer to be kind of audited by Data Protection Authority? And yeah, as I said, I think this is about kind of, maybe since we're from Europe, maybe we have a different tradition. Here in Norway, we have very good tradition for privacy on the workplace, and yeah, we don't want to challenge that. We want to just help people stay safe online, but then we need to use some tool to get there, and more efficiently than before. So we're exploring the waters, so to say, and the sandbox has given us a good opportunity to do that. And yeah, the final report is coming in November. So yeah, I don't want to spend very much more time on that since we're already far out, but yeah, I'll be happy to answer any questions about this, or yeah, looking forward to the discussion.
Great, thank you so much, Alan. That was a great presentation as well. It's good that we have like three kind of very different I guess approaches or people when it comes to thinking about the information that we receive, both on through the media, but also through our emails. I've seen a lot of really bad scam emails come through the university's email servers, so that there is certainly room for improvement. So if I could call back Morten and Eirik now for the plenary discussion, that would be great. Let's see. So first, I was just curious, Morten, just how do you teach critical thinking? Because I mean, it's a skill that a lot of people want, people in the population to have, but how do you approach this?
So teaching critical thinking obviously is quite hard. I have to say though that the teaching part is not really, it's not my division of Faktisk, so I will just speak briefly for them. So they try to give educators, that means teachers, tools and various other things, so methods and so on, to teach their students critical thinking. And I mean, most of it really boils down to just stop and think about what you're actually seeing. So a lot of the times when we accept or spread misinformation online, or accept misinformation from people we know or from public figures, it's because we accept it immediately and don't really stop and think. So it's mostly about teaching people to stay calm, think things through a couple of times, and then check maybe with other sources if possible. So it's more about teaching that kind of calmness and preparedness than anything else. And obviously also to teach them what they need to know about the platforms they're using, the media they're consuming, and so on.
Yeah, and yeah, I was just really curious about this Grindr case, Eirik, because a fine has been issued, but can it be followed up? That's I think your leader has been confronted a lot on this, whether the Norwegian DPA can go through with such a fine, or to what extent that can be the case. I guess this is relevant for all of us when there are these large technology actors in question.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, we have been challenged on that. And it has been pretty interesting to work with a part that has, a 100 or 10 million pound fine means that the other part can use a lot of money on lawyers, and that we have noticed. So this is a case that is taking a lot of our resources in terms of handling the case. That we are the competent authority to deal with this on behalf of EU, that's been established. But of course, we are getting a lot of text back with the arguments about if that there being disagreements and so on. But it's also about actually trying to understand what are they actually doing and who is responsible, because Grindr, for example, claims that they're just using an ad network. They're using services as well. They're not really handing out personal data. But the problem here is that by using these APIs and these different libraries of services, they are enabling generation of personal data. And that's the core problem. And actually, as the report from the Consumer Council showed, trying to peer into these black boxes in terms of how this works is very complicated and extremely challenging. So yes, it's been a challenge. We do feel that we have a pretty good handle on the dialogue, but let's see what happens.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's certainly challenging, and I really like the statement from black box to sandbox, and I think the sandboxes were suggested in the new proposed AI regulations, and it's good to see that we are or have been doing this sandbox approach like even before they were proposed, both in the Finanstilsynet and also Datatilsynet. So, but I wonder what risk category I would be, Alan. You know, when Jan, when you categorize people into these different boxes, it's a very interesting challenge. You know, it's like what people are risky, you know, or what people are security risks. You know, I guess for Morten as well, it would be a case of like who is going to share misinformation, you know, like, or so I mean, it's challenging then to approach these. I guess they like to label them as social dilemmas nowadays, like with this large documentary Social Dilemma about you know, Facebook, and you know, this when you try to pinpoint information to the extent that you kind of think that you know a person, right, based on these data touch points, and then you categorize based on that. That's to a large extent what Facebook is doing in like their advertising and marketing, etc., to reach people. So so like, how is this going in the AI, you know, sandbox, Alan? And like, you know, what can we expect going forward? It's can you give us some teasers, you know, because this is really interesting.
Yeah, I think the sandbox here in Norway, it's mostly for companies who are motivated to actually solve a problem and put their effort into doing a proper effort to solve it. Actually, I mean, I think one of the challenges with like big tech, Facebook, is they don't want to change. And then you have this, I mean, why should they participate in a sandbox? I mean, we get some resources to try and solve a challenge that would otherwise be difficult because it's about legal landscape that hasn't been explored fully. It's about AI and how should that like legislation be applied when we do this processing. I was thinking when you mentioned this about like identifying people who could spread misinformation. I mean, if Facebook actually say, okay, we're going to solve the problem with misinformation by profiling people in terms of who are going to spread misinformation, would you appreciate having that label on you if you asked for your data kind of and see that you have been labeled as a potential misinformation spreader? And this is also one of the very interesting things we're trying to find out in the sandbox. We have done focus groups with end users. We've been talking to trade unions, and we've been exploring transparency and actually finding people. Of course, they have a right for transparency in services, but then not all transparency kind of you need to kind of communicate it right, otherwise you will kind of feel labeled in a way that is very square box, and AI can be just like that, but it's not meant to be like a truth statement about you. You're not a risk, although we kind of put you in a risk category to provide you with this and that training kind of.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's like information, but what you do with the information that you have in a sense, or like how do you manage that information? So I just have a really short question for Eirik from the audience, and then I have a question for that I want Morten to try to approach. So Eirik, is it possible to give UiO and other Norwegian universities and colleges an official kind of advice to remove their social media links? Or like that was a question from the audience.
Yeah, that's not actually the way we work. As we can, in ways, when there are actual happenings or incidents, we can probably do something like that. But what we can do, and what we probably will do, is recommend that they do their own risk assessment. So they have to do their own DPA, the data protection impact assessment, for example. And we suspect that if you actually do that, following the process and following the guidelines in those processes, it could be difficult to conclude that it's okay to use Facebook. But we're not going to ask them to remove or not use specific services, but we are going to ask them to do proper risk assessments.
Yeah, so you would expect like risk assessments from the university probably have some kind of data protection impact assessment on this already, or perhaps it will become a more common practice for that to be at least required to some extent on these platforms.
And based on that assessment, we can perhaps have discussions with them whether or not we think their assessments are well-founded.
I see. Yeah, I have my own question to that, but first I want to visit another question from the audience. Myths and lies are two sides of the same coin, they say. How can you curb the influence of fake news propagated in real time using different platforms, Facebook, WhatsApp, etc.? In India, WhatsApp messages can be sent to only a few persons, not sure. After a series of fatal incidents based on fake news, is it the duty of regulatory organs to nip the problem at the bud stage in real time? Can AI techniques handle this task? Any sandbox cases addressing this problem? So I guess it's a bit of a joint address here to Morten and Eirik, but I would really like to start, Morten, if possible.
Yeah, so this is a really interesting question. I think it goes sort of to the core of what fact checkers are dealing with, especially in their relation to the major social media platforms. So I'm going to start off just by describing very briefly how we work with platforms like Facebook to try to curb misinformation. So a lot of the ways in which external organizations like fact checkers deal with misinformation on platforms is after the fact. And that's partly so through the third-party fact-checking program with Facebook, we are able to label pieces of information as false, misleading, and so on. But that can only happen after we've actually published a fact check on that particular piece of information. So once we do that, then the internal Facebook AI will recognize similar pieces of misinformation that have the same claim, and then label that as well. So that's one thing, but that only happens after the misinformation has already been spread and spread widely enough that it's come to our notice. And this is something that's also done in, for example, India and the US and so on. So we don't really know how much this helps. We know that there is some, in contrast to just doing it through AI alone, there is some, hopefully, security in having professional fact checkers and independent fact checkers go through the information and checking it in advance. But our capacity is very limited, so we're not really able to strike down all of the misinformation, right? So maybe you could do it through AI, but I think the information, what we know about Facebook's and other platforms' efforts in using AI to detect and label misinformation, it has not been very successful. So it's something that hasn't really worked. I'm also worried that, I mean, Eirik can probably speak more to this, but I'm worried that if regulators in at least some countries are able to nip it in the bud, as it says in the question, I think that could be problematic because it's a question of who gets to label misinformation as, or information as misinformation, right? I mean, that's a major challenge. I think independent fact checkers are in a fairly good position to do so. Government agencies and regulators, maybe not so much. So this is a really difficult problem, and I can't really see that it's solvable on the level of either AI or fact checking. maybe you might be able to do something on some platforms through tweaking the algorithms, but I'm not really sure if that's going to be workable either. So I'm quite pessimistic about this, actually.
Yeah, I guess Facebook improved their sort of AI moderation a lot more during the COVID as well, because they had a lot of staff that weren't, that had to be sent home, and they don't really hire people to moderate in their own company. They use subcontractors, right, as well. So mainly through subcontracting. I guess that's like a part of the information infrastructure.
Just quickly, I think most of these subcontractors have actually been replaced with AI at this point. So that happened last year. And some types of misinformation, like on COVID, is relatively easy to detect. They've done the same thing for vaccine misinformation as well. So that's quite recognizable. But misinformation can always take new forms, which makes it much harder to detect. So I think really we could also see during the US election last year that Facebook tweaked their algorithm to prioritize credible news sources and so on, which actually changed the spread of misinformation on the platform. But that change was reverted very quickly and has not been brought back since.
See, yeah. So Eirik, the second part of this question about the role of this the regulatory or like data protection to protect the citizens. Is there anything addressing these issues? I guess.
Countries and regulatory bodies wanting to monitor and have a control with the people's real-time communication is called something specific. It's called censorship. So it's extremely problematic, to be honest. So I don't see that anytime soon. I think Faktisk.no is a better. So you have to look at the propagation of the information at the platforms. Actually trying to monitor things, real-time communications in that way could be very, very troublesome and probably not something we want.
Yeah, no, it's definitely really like a tough problem, like to decide what information is the correct information or not. But as you say, in some cases, it's just blatantly kind of obvious that this is not very good for society.
Yeah, probably know about the recent incident in Lithuania, where the Lithuanian government said that you have to throw away Chinese telephones or specific models of Chinese telephones. And the reasons was, of course, that there were some built-in functionality, not enabled, but it was a built-in functionality to censor some words. So if you search for Kathmandu, Nepal, and stuff like that, Uyghurs and so on, those search words wouldn't trigger anything. So yeah, it's more in line of China and North Korea more than in Europe, I think.
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of this proposed regulation from the EU is also kind of very targeted towards these surveillance questions, as you were mentioning, Eirik. So that's we do see some large regulatory moves. But are there any large collaborations on misinformation in Norway? Who is collaborating on this? Like or like. I mean, of course, we have different security agencies, and like if we go to that side of the spectrum and cybercrime, etc., there's been a lot of developments, right, Alan? But towards this misinformation side, like what's your network, Morten? Like who do you work with? How does this interact?
So in Norway, we work obviously with the major news organizations to sort of spread fact checking to their audiences as well, and with Medietilsynet, so the Media Supervision Authority, I think is the English term. We also actually have a Nordic collaboration that was funded by the European Union this year. So it's called Nordis. So it's a collaboration between academics and fact checkers in the Nordic countries, so Denmark, Norway, Finland, and Sweden. So that's maybe the biggest network. And we're also, I mean, for fact checking, there's also a big global network called the IFCN, so the International Fact Checking Network, that also sort of has a code of principles that fact checkers must adhere to in order to be members. So you have sort of a class of IFCN certified fact checkers. Otherwise, there are not really that major. There are sort of ad hoc collaborations between us and researchers and so on.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions for the DPA here, like, but There's another question, this time from Silvina, about have you ever found yourself in a situation where, with the intention of conducting fact-checking, the data protection regulations in force in the country where the data you sought to dissect resided in prevented you from completing a full comprehensive fact-checking? Well, that's this, like, again, split between DPA and Faktisk, I guess, to some extent. Because, for example, the Grindr case, you know, you were prevented, or you are still being prevented by a lot of lawyers, right? To to figure out what kind of data is being used and like how it's being used. So and you have given a fine, you know, so you have attempted to take regulatory action. But yeah, we've just hit 1500. So maybe I don't imagine we can have any short answer to this.
Just want to make clear that Grindr doesn't necessarily try to hide information, but they are certainly not agreeing with us on everything. It's more about that.
Yeah, so they have been quite good and in kind of sharing and being transparent with.
They are willing to go in a dialogue, somewhat better than Facebook has been, for example.
For example. So yeah, Morten.
I can actually give a very short answer to this question first. So the answer is no, that hasn't actually happened. What has happened is that we have, so once we were investigating some stuff that happened at the Statistics Norway, and there was some company that had delivered flawed data, and we wanted to identify the company in the interest of sort of full transparency, but we weren't able to do that through Statistics Norway itself because of the statistics regulations that protect the privacy of the companies that contribute to the statistics.
Great, thank you. Any last words from Alan? Any sort of like broad overarching thoughts? I'm giving you like a final word here somehow.
Oh, what an honor. Well, I just say again, you need this willingness to learn and to actually take responsibility for the service you offer. And although we're not seeing that from Facebook, they launched this Meta branding yesterday, right? But there is actually another initiative called Meta, which is Twitter, which is their internal. It's a abbreviation for machine learning, ethics, transparency, and accountability. Meta, and this is led by Raman Chaudhary, and they have been making progress on. I mean, we see these examples of for instance. AI gone wrong, where you crop photos in the wrong way and stuff. And Meta said in an article I read just yesterday about, I mean, ethics is about a world of unintended consequences, and you still need education to do things right. And we're talking to people who wanted to do the right thing, but didn't know how to do the right thing. So although there are a lot of politics and big tech priorities, there are also many people who would do the right thing if they just knew how to do it. Yeah, let's figure out how. And thank you so much for being here today. You know, thank you for taking the time to the panelists. We really appreciate this. And of course, we will put this up online, and we hope that people as well in our network can see it going forward. So thank you so much for being here today with us.